you don't own any of the games that you buy with your hard-earned cash. Well, that's what Ubisoft wants us to believe regarding one of their recent lawsuits. Yes, you heard that right. Apparently, we don't own anything that we decide to buy. And this is relating to an issue that stemmed quite a few years ago and has come to light again recently. And I think it's very fitting for the time that we live in, even with the release of the Switch 2, where, they are releasing game cartridges with just the license key called game card keys and not contain the full game or contain only parts of the game. It is definitely a strange time that we live in, but this lawsuit is extremely important because it raises a lot of questions. And surprisingly, a lot of us would agree that that idea that we don't own the games that we buy is factually incorrect. However, it's kind of a complicated issue and the answers may not be exactly what you seem. Because, hear me out, Ubisoft's technically not in the wrong. Morally, yes, they are completely wrong for the idea that they should be able to withhold access to any game that they make when and where they see fit. Just because from a moral standpoint, no one wants to believe that, hey, I bought this game and you can take it away from me whenever you want, especially if it's a physical copy. But this is a very grey issue, and hear me out because I gotta explain some things in this video. For those of you who are unaware, Ubisoft made an online car game called The Crew. This is sort of a online MMO racing game where you can play with other players on one shared map. I never got the chance to play it, and funny, I never will. That is kind of sad, but that is the world that we live in. And unfortunately, it's a downside to the technological progress we made over the years, but it's kind of been an issue that's lurking under the surface. Ubisoft is the first company to actually bring this issue into the mainstream. So let's talk about it. So 2014's The Crew is no longer accessible, even if you have bought a physical version of the game. Yes, some of you guys may think, oh, the digital copy, it was pulled from stores or it's no longer working. But even if you bought a physical copy trying to protect yourself from losing access, well, you're wrong. And that's surprising because I am one of those people that like to buy physical copies because that way I have access to my own content and the company can't take it away from me or pull it from under your rug. That's not the case. So what happened? The servers completely went down towards the end of March last year, so about a year ago now, and there's been no signs of the game coming back to life. And players were extremely unhappy about this and took this to court. So unhappy, they actually made a full-on lawsuit. You can actually read this lawsuit. I will leave a link to the lawsuit in the description below so you can actually have a read yourself. It's 35 pages full of law jargon. I don't know, and I'm not trying to read all of this because reading is difficult and I'm not going to do that. But if you want, there it is for you. So the main talking points of this lawsuit was that players believed they were paying to own and possess the video game The Crew instead of paying for a limited license to The Crew, and of course that's exactly what we all would think. However, it's a bit of a difficult one as in the lawsuit, it was quite interesting because the people who made it actually provided images that show the activation code for the racing game clearly shows that it does not expire until the year 2099, which kind of implies that the game would remain playable during this time and a long time after. And it kind of makes sense. If I see a code that says this will be able to be activated until 2099, why would I not be able to play the game up until that moment in time? That clearly isn't the game. We didn't get 100-year access to the game. We got about, let's see, the game made in 2016 went down, so under 10 years, not even close to 2099. Now, Ubisoft completely disagrees with this, saying that they only gained access to basically the permission to play the game, so basically a license. And the argument is that players were completely misled into the purchase of the video game, believing that they were purchasing unfettered ownership rights in the game rather than a limited license to access. But the reality is that consumers received the benefits of their bargain, and they were explicitly notified at the time of purchase that they were purchasing a license. On the actual packaging on the Xbox and PlayStation, it contains in clear notice, in all capital letters, that Ubisoft may cancel access to one or more specific online features upon a 30-day prior notice. So with all that being said, what does this mean? Well, it's a tricky one, because I'm sure a lot of you guys completely agree that, Ubisoft are in the wrong, they're a horrible company for doing this, and they should not get away. And I agree with you, but legally, it's a bit of a gray area. But nowadays, it's very common to have subscription-based business models and software as a service. That is typically how it goes, and it reminds me of one quote that I read: "You will own nothing and be happy." This is a phrase from the 2016 predictions for the year 2033 published by the World Economic Forum. This shines extremely true for today, especially with the Nintendo Switch 2 situation, and even more for The Crew, because Ubisoft are not backing down from this lawsuit, at least from what I have read so far and my understanding. Surprisingly, there's been a bit of a debate online about the current situation. How is this gonna work? Obviously, none of us actually want to believe that we are just purchasing a license, especially when we actually have a physical CD that we put into our consoles or PCs, even when we have a digital copy as well. But it's, believable that a digital copy can be, taken from the App Store or any gaming platform, because we've seen that happen time and time again. It's not super concerning. We've seen it happen with MMOs. As soon as they not become profitable, the servers go down, or any multiplayer service. Of course, The Crew is a car MMO game, so somewhat to be expected, but losing complete access to play the physical CD that you own, basically turning your game into a brick, only to be useful as a coaster for your cup of tea or coffee, that's not what you want. But if you actually think about how this works from a legal perspective and even from a technical perspective, even when you buy a game, you are kind of buying the license to play the game. You don't legally own the game. You can't make copies of this game and then give it to more people, because you don't have rights to the game. You are just allowed to play it, and the game, you've just been given a medium to do so. So technically, Ubisoft are in the right. Morally, it's horrible, and no one is happy with this, and I don't agree that this should happen at all, and there should be alternative measures to counteract this, and it's kind of sad that there hasn't been done so already, because I'm sure everyone has had online games that they can no longer play anymore. Club Penguin comes to mind. That game is dead, and it's not coming back. Just none of us thought it would happen to an actual CD that you put into your console, and the game basically becomes useless. But now it appears to be the case. For example, the Switch 2. If you want to know more about the Switch 2 situation and the game key cards, make sure to watch this video over here, because similarly, we are now getting game cards that now just come with the license key to download the game. So even if you buy a physical game, you still need the internet to play it, and if that download server goes down, the game is useless now. What's the point? And it's tricky, because I've been thinking about this one for a long time. Even if you go way back, my favorite games are old-fashioned PC games like Call of Duty 2 and other games that are like Age of Empires and some of the classic Civilization. Technically, even with those days, if you guys remember, you had a CD and you had a license key, obviously to prevent piracy and, controlling who's playing the game and make sure you pay for it. But back then, you were given the game copy, the game CD, as a medium for playing the game. And obviously, since game sizes were a lot smaller and online services were a lot weaker, we didn't have access to the internet all of the time, for example. It was very slow and not really effective to download all your games. One, because the internet was not as fast as it is now or accessible, and the game sizes were significantly smaller. You could fit it all on one CD. However, after games have grown in size and the internet has become extremely mainstream and accessible, and it's become the norm to either play games online or have to download most games that you play, that really doesn't need to happen anymore. These CDs or cartridges were just a way to provide the media of the game to your console, put it on your console so you can activate it. And even then, with a physical CD, for a lot of these games, even if you had the CD and you install it, you still need the license key to play it. So a license key was still required. Of course, you own the game and it would work. It wouldn't really work without the key, but you still had all the game contents on the game. But doesn't mean you can copy it and start doing whatever you want to it. So even then, you somewhat only own the rights to play the game. And this has sparked a bit of a conversation in terms of, is games a good or is it a service? Now, it's a bit of a tricky one because some people can see it either way. And nowadays, you can definitely argue that gaming is more of a service, especially with how it works, where you have season passes and you just kind of play the game as it rolls out. And objectively, not everyone is happy with how modern games are going, as they're more focused on the monetary aspect and creating really uncreative games and focusing way too much on the money side and monetary side, pushing more bland, uncreative, garbage out to the mainstream because companies only care about money and they don't really care about consumers too much. But as consumers, we need to stop demanding more rights. And gaming has become more predatory over the last few years, and we need to address it, we need to talk about it, and we should fix it. What does it mean for the future of gaming? Well, the problem is, it looks like Ubisoft wins this case. It kind of sets a good precedent that, more companies can get away with this in the future. And this is just the way games are going to go moving forward, where you don't own the game, you're just allowed to play the game in that certain amount of time. So what can we do about it? Well, not much, unless people start demanding more. And don't get me wrong, this really isn't just a gaming issue as well, because this is affecting all aspects of life. It'd be more common to outright own something many years ago. Nowadays, most people, lease their car, for example, and they just own the car while they are making those payments. They don't outright own the car until they do all the payments. And for example, with a lot of services, back in the day, I remember seeing the absurd price point of Photoshop, and you go buy a copy of Photoshop and you have access to like 2010 Photoshop or other Adobe software. Then again, technically you don't own Photoshop. You still own access rights to that version, but you had it. You didn't really need a constant internet connection required to play it. And I think that's where a lot of the annoyance comes from, needing a constant connection to the internet to play products that you buy, and you have, you play them anywhere and however you want. But unfortunately, that isn't the case, and it isn't looking to be the case pretty much anymore. It's not all bad because, back then, with the Photoshop as an example, the licensing and having a subscription-based model isn't terrible, because I remember when I saw those Photoshop prices, there was no way I could afford to fork out hundreds and hundreds of pounds for a copy of a service. But now that they're implementing a more service-based approach, the cost of entry is definitely lowered. So don't get me wrong, there is advantages to the subscription-based model, but I agree with not just the gaming industry, most aspects in life, the whole subscription-based service is definitely leading to a world where you will likely own nothing, and again, you will be happy. I guess the point, even with that point, is that you have less to worry about, since you actually don't have to own anything. You just own the right to use whatever you need to survive in terms of entertainment or shelter or transportation. You just own the subscription to use everything. And 2030, I mean, how many years are we out from that? 5. And if this is what's happening now, who knows? But that's kind of derailing the conversation, and I want to talk about something that's been popping up more and more recently that is quite interesting. And this is also in line with the Switch 2, with the news about that. Again, you want to know about the overall Switch 2 situation, make sure to click this video. I have a whole bunch of videos on the Switch 2 and all of the controversy around that. Feel free to watch those. But here's the thing, a lot of people have now been justifying piracy a lot more. Like 5-10 years ago, you wouldn't be able to get away with openly saying you support piracy and you should basically steal or download games without permission or licenses. But nowadays, I see this topic come up more and more, as piracy is a way to maybe get back at corporations. I'm not too involved in this conversation, and I don't quite understand the topic too much regarding justifying piracy, because of course, if you want a product, you should pay for it and you should buy the license. But more and more people are justifying the use of piracy to play the content that they want, maybe as a way to improve consumers' rights. Again, I have no clue. That conversation is out of my depth. And if you want to drop your opinions regarding gaming and piracy, please let me know in the comments. But with the rapid increase of prices with the Switch, making games just unaffordable and just inaccessible, and how now we are downloading games off a physical cartridge, and in some cases, your content that you're paying for is just a key code that, provides you access to a DLC or an upgrade pack. A lot of people are now kind of losing hope and saying, you know what, why am I even bothering? I'm just going to download what I need and just call it a day. And this is a kind of this is an important point. If this many people are losing faith in the industry and rather just go through the piracy route instead, maybe that will be something I discuss in the future. But if you guys want to know something even more interesting than all of this, but how about learning about the world's most toxic video game player? And if you are interested, make sure to watch this video over here. This guy was very toxic. Alright, see you in the next video.